is without doubt one of the deadliest places on earth for Christians. And finally, a leader with the kahunas to call it out for what it is, Mr. Trump again, is actually taking some actions against the Muslim extremists who are killing Christians. Whilst the mainstream media has tried really, really hard over the last few days to have you believe that this is nonsense, the facts are very clear. We are talking Boko Haram, Islamic State and Finaly militants who are killing Christians in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. They are rampaging their way through Christian communities, massacring men, women, babies and using plenty of sexual violence along the way. They're using suicide bombs, kidnapping, and they do target Muslims if they get in the way, but their main target are Christians. Open Doors, an interest society who look at this in great detail, report that Nigeria is the global epicentre for Christian attacks. There have been over 7,000 Christians killed in the first half of 2005, the number still being collated for the second half, and since 2009 at least 100,000, probably more. There have indeed been 60,000 Muslims killed in that same time period. The situation remains dire for many Christians in Nigeria, and they are calling for better protection. But the worry once again is that the West is bending over backwards to not call a spade, all in the name of cultural sensitivity. You know, that one that has allowed Asian grooming gangs to exist in this country to this very day. The fact that these groups also kill Muslims along the way is tragic again. But it should be the warning to the West that when these groups have finished with the Christians and the Jews, they are coming for you and I, because anyone that doesn't fit their very small definition of what is godly will be dispensed with. So stand up, I say, to our cowardly politicians, call this out for what it is and act, because we need it now. The West is under attack.
An Egyptian television news program says that Turkey is clearly a terrorist state with a broad reach. It reports that Turkey is supplying weapons to the terrorist group Boko Haram in Nigeria.
Now, residents of Masalachi in Tangaza local government area in Sokoto State have reported seeing terrorists fleeing forest after attacks by the United States. The Nigerian government and the United States had struck several forests, including Kawuri, Kamdam and Malgam, where the Lakura terrorists are based. Reports say several of the terrorists were killed and their properties destroyed. Arise News Chief Correspondent Ferdinand Duroa is in Masalachi to give us update. Thank you for joining us, Ferdinand. Bring us up to speed on what's going on right there.
All right, thank you so much. And yes, it is the sojourner to ensure that we get exactly the details of what happened on Christmas Day. In the last 48 hours, well, we have been going around Sokoto State, well, particularly to places where did feel the effect. And yes, we went to Jabo in Tambawa local government area, and today we are in Tangaza, where we can confirm to you that is indeed the hub of Lakurawa activities here in Sokoto State. Now we are talking about where the attacks were indeed meant to hit, and we can confirm that yes, the locations were struck. Now we've spoken to some of the villagers, and also some of the traders, because this is a route. After here, from this point, you cross over, and then it leads on to Niger Republic, well, then leads on to Ghana, leads on to Burkina Faso, leads on to Mali. And from exactly what they've told us, well, they've told us exactly how much travelers from the Sahel, well, you want to call them travelers, or how much migrants from the Sahel have indeed been a destruction to the community, where there's so much fear in the air, so much fear in the air. But then from what they've told us, well, they can confirm that yes, clearance activities are taking place just behind us in some of the forest. Well, they mentioned the Kawuri forest, and then also they mentioned the is it Malgam forest, where the actions place, talking about the strikes. And then also some gentlemen told us about the movements of terrorists. Now, they actually described how they had moved from one part of the forest, where they call the north, to, of course, another place. So that's the situation. Well, I'm not alone. I've made this journey with our correspondent, who indeed is on ground here in Sokoto State with me. Nasiru, please join me, and let's indeed take a look at this situation.
Thank you, Frederick.
Well, we wouldn't want to say it's a revelation that was made, because these are some of the stories that you have reported, including the activities of those coming from the Sahel, who indeed come in, cause disruptions, and go away. But then the only situation right now is that, yes, this is the first time that we're getting pictures in Tangasa since that attack on Christmas Day.
Exactly, Mr. Ferdinand. Tangasa has a very complicated security situation where the Lakura operated, and also they have bandit, and also a kind of a tribal conflict between the Hausas and the Fulani. But the coming of the Lakura in 2024, they've been here since 2018, and they've been disrupting the livestock of people. That is what they specialize in rustling animals. But with this attack, this bombardment from the U.S. government on Christmas Day, the villagers really confirmed that, the U.S. airstrike hit the target, because they could confirm that people are moving from Kauri, Kandam, Malgam, where the Lakura have their base, and even are very, very comfortable digging a borehole and even a well to make it a permanent camp. That particular place has been hit by this attack.
Just to interrupt you, well, I think that's one of the revelations from this. We're talking about how much development they say have taken place in some of these settlements in the forest. They talk about boreholes being built.
Exactly.
Talk about wells being dug by terrorists. And then who indeed come out to cause commotion, cause problems, make it difficult for the people to indeed, have a normal lifestyle, rear cattle, steal, kidnap, and of course go away.
Exactly. They waited until your farm produce are ready for harvest, and they start coming. Either they kidnap and to ask you to sell your farm produce. And in most instances, this farm produce, you have to pay levy to harvest. And after you pay levy, they also come for you. They kidnap the breadwinners in the home, and they know you cannot allow your father or your breadwinners to be with them. You have to pay. So the community here have suffered a lot. I could tell you history of what has been happening. I could remember in 2020, the DPO of Tangasa was killed right inside the police divisional headquarters. 6 other police officers were killed also. And in 2021, to just paint the tribal conflict perspective of it, 6 Fulani persons officially reported were killed. But situation here, it's a bit complicated. At a point, the Lakura were even helping the locals to push back the bandit. That was when some local government officials actually confirmed that they have a hand in inviting the Lakura into the community. But at a point, that period, the Lakura were serving as reformers in a way, trying to instill a kind of religion of their own, trying to regulate people, try to regulate what you wear, what you eat, what you drink, and at the point they became a problem.
Well, some of the historical perspectives to it, but then the news is that yes, before now there have been worries, there have been discussions, and then about trying to get that confirmation concerning the attack. But we can indeed confirm to you precise attacks on some of those locations, and of course it did cause plenty of havoc.
Very good. Ferdinand and Nasser, I've got a question for you. It's one thing to have these strikes, but there's a need to consolidate on whatever achievements you may have gained here. Okay, the reports we're getting that you're just giving us is that some of these terrorists are leaving some of these localities, as it were. Do we have a plan, a sort of plan with the Nigerian troops, perhaps moving in and consolidate their hold on those regions that has been, unquote, maybe liberated, and at least have a military presence there on ground? It's not just to have these strikes and then leave the place the way it is, and they come back again. So are you hearing any word on that? Definitely.
For I think 2 days ago, the Defense Headquarters did put out a statement talking about, some kind of clearance operations. And then also, personally, I have reached out, spoken to a couple of them. And yes, I did get the same information. Now, for some reasons, we were, we were giving some advice, about moving further, though we've been able to get some very interesting pictures. But the truth is, there is need for consolidation, and that's because lots of people are beginning to talk about what might happen after now. There are confirmations that they have been able to, they are leaving their bases, and what it means is that they might be looking for some other places to go resettle, and that's even because the community themselves, they want to use this opportunity to come together, rally themselves together, and then for some of the institutions that are not really working, they want to enhance these institutions and then ensure that, yes, they begin to get things like intelligence so that they can indeed help the authorities. Well, beyond that, people are asking what exactly is going to happen right now. Now, from what we gathered, we gathered that, these persons, somehow, they have been so integrated into the society that in some places that they have even married some of their daughters. And so, lots of people are beginning to say, okay, this is perhaps the time when we can begin to go into their houses, go into those places who are related with them, and then begin to dig in for more information. So there's a whole lot that needs to happen after now. It is one thing to have these strikes, but definitely the government and, of course, the military must consolidate on this.
In Nigeria, 10 TV host Nashat Al-Delhi reported on a leak confirming an intercepted phone call from a few years back confirming the action. He reported in part, today's leak confirms without a doubt that Erdogan, his state, his government, and his party are transferring weapons from Turkey to, this is a shock, to where you may ask, to Nigeria, and to whom? To the Boko Haram organization. Well, Raymond Ibrahim, a journalism fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and an expert on the Middle East and Islam, joins us now with more on this. Welcome, Raymond.
Hello, Heather.
Are you surprised by this report? What's your take on it?
No, I'm not surprised. And my take on it is that the actual tape that was made that you referenced and you quoted was made apparently in 2014 or 15. And it was reported widely in certain areas in the U.S. and in the West, not so much, and not much came out of it. And the reason, I think, is because Erdogan wasn't didn't have his fingers so much in Islamist politics outside of his own nation. But now that we've seen, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the ISIS Islamic State caliph who was killed recently, and he was found just 3 miles from the Turkish border, which is in fact one of the last, or if not the last bastion of jihadi so-called freedom fighters of attacking the Syrian government. It's brought it up again, the fact that everyone is saying, well, look, he's supporting ISIS. So now we're remembering, and that was, I think, the point of the Egyptian show. We're bringing back to see that there's some continuity here. It's not just right next door to Syria, to Turkey, meaning Syria. He's involved with some of the absolute worst Islamic terror groups. Remember, Boko Haram, which its name loosely means Western education is forbidden, haram, was basically doing what ISIS is notorious for years before ISIS. So the whole, head chopping, crucifying, massacres, enslaving women and children, burning people alive. Boko Haram was doing that. And one of the things that international observers have been noticing, especially increasingly, is that their armaments, their weapons, are very sophisticated. And it's even spilled into the Fulani tribesmen in Nigeria and in other parts in Africa. For example, I'm sure you know, Burkina Faso, also in Western Africa, attacks on Christians have become horrific. Just in the last few months, there have been so many killed, and always in the context of checking out if they're wearing crosses, if they can say the Islamic creed or not, and then being butchered and so forth. And those tribesmen, the Fulani, who are essentially living almost on a primitive scale, appear with very advanced weaponry.
Well, that's really interesting, which would kind of seem to perhaps give more weight to this idea that perhaps Turkey is collaborating with Boko Haram. What would the benefit be to Turkey of collaborating with Boko Haram?
Well, there's several theories. One is Erdogan basically is an ardent Islamist, and he is supporting and behind any Islamist movement in any country. He's the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He was allied with Qatar of Al Jazeera as his ally. And so you can see him, he's trying to help develop these Islamist groups so they can overthrow more secular states. Though, in fact, in Nigeria, an aside that I think is important, the president himself, Muhammad Buhari, of Nigeria, who's Muslim, Nigeria is half Christian, half Muslim, has been accused himself of being behind this, the so-called genocide, which a lot of international groups have called what's happening to Christians in Nigeria, that he himself is complicit in this armament. So he could very well be an ally of Erdogan and so forth, and it's just some sort of Islamist overall coalition globally.
I want to ask you, the President Trump, of course, met with the President of Turkey yesterday. Do you think he's aware of these kind of ties to terrorism? And what are your thoughts on that meeting yesterday?
Well, in general, I think, what he's aware of is really hard to tell. But I think the meeting in general, Trump and presidents won't necessarily bring up all these things, obviously. So when he met, for example, in Saudi Arabia with the king and so forth, he doesn't really mention human rights abuses and so forth for whatever strategic tactical reasons. So it's really hard to predict, but I think he needs to be aware because Erdogan's really, he's got his fingerprints everywhere now. It's not just Syria, which is very obvious, but now there's older evidence of him involved in Nigeria and also in Turkey itself, the Christian population, the minority there. And remember, Turkey was originally entirely Christian. It was Anatolia. It was actually where St. Paul wrote all his epistles to. They're really being treated badly and discriminated against, and a lot of hate preaching in Turkey is increasingly against Christians and Jews. So definitely Turkey's going down the wrong path with Erdogan, though many Turks themselves remain committed to the Ataturk ideal of secularism.
Well, we are out of time, but Raymond Ibrahim, thank you for your time and your insights here.
That the day that the federal government wants insurgency to stop in Nigeria and in Benue State, it will be done. Unfortunately, I have consistently accused the federal government for being complacent. And I have proof to show to the entire world that federal government is complicit. Tell me, even me as governor of Benue State, attempted assassination was done on me for more than 1 year. Up to today, no culprits have been brought to book. And as I talk to you, even those that I was told as governor of Benue State that they were arrested, they have been freed. These are Finaly herdsmen or militia who were arrested, and they have been freed. The person they are prosecuting is my cousin and a Jukum fisherman who had no link with what happened to me when I was attacked more than 1 year ago. So this is the challenge that we have. The day that the federal government wants this insurgency and killings and invasion and taking over of our land by these Finaly herdsmen, any day that the federal government wants it will stop. But for now, I accuse them to be complicit because severally I have provided a solution and say that the way to go, can we have a security summit where Samuel Otom will be there to talk about the facts that are available in my own state? And then we can listen to other states who will tell us what has been going on in their state. And then we'll try to provide a solution if the federal government wants that. So today, I want to say that the federal government is complicit, and until they are ready to work with us, but because it is a planned agenda over 200 years ago that they have planned to take over Nigeria.
Looking at the map of Nigeria you see here, you see this section in yellow, 12 contiguous states. Simultaneously imposed Sharia in year 2000, meaning that they consulted it was their state House of Assembly that did all of what was done. Their governors signed such things into those legislations into law and set up the Hisbah, the Sharia police that have been enforcing. They've never repealed any of those laws. The same way they pass them, they may tell you, oh, it's a joke, Sharia does not exist. But it exists in Kano, destroying people's business. It exists in Sokoto, destroying people's business. And so we come down to Section 10. Let's listen very carefully. For those who may think that these are troublemakers, who don't wish Nigeria well, Nigeria, the Federation, is not what we are discussing. Nigeria, the Federation, died a long time ago. But Nigeria, the unitary state, the monster that is now feeding on the blood of those it's holding by force against the will. It is that Nigeria that has, the Nigeria that should have been our union was agreed to be a secular state. For which reason, Section 10 of the 1999 Constitution, as disputed as it is, Section 10 expressly forbids the adoption of any state religion by the government of the Federation or that of any state. That's no state, the government of the Federation or that of a state shall not adopt any religion as state religion. That's the entire provision of Section 10. And so when in year 2000, these 12 contiguous states that run from Sokoto Kebbi through Kano Jigawa to Borno in the uppermost north of Nigeria simultaneously imposed Sharia, adopted and imposed Sharia and began to implement it, they had seceded from the secular union of Nigeria as dictated by Section 10. That says they should not do such a thing. They should not adopt state religion. And so we were, ordinarily it would have been to go and quarrel with them. But we took a second look at it in this project. And we said that this is self-determination that they have exercised. And they went through due process. They consulted among themselves. That was why they could act simultaneously. They are contiguous. They were not picking one here, picking one there, so you don't know how they came about it. They are contiguous. They acted simultaneous. And so it must be that they consulted. But if anybody was in doubt, they went through the due process of their state assemblies passing the law. They also went through the due process of their governors signing and setting up the Hisbah. And so we interpreted it to mean that they had decided to secede from the secular union we were building together with them. They've left the Nigerian Union. They've now regrouped and are coming on a conquest mission, knowing that the title, having abandoned their own title deed in that respect, that the constitution by which Nigeria is convened and controlled and managed, they departed from that constitution by imposing Sharia. But they regrouped and they are here now overrunning, invading communities, killing people and bringing their the Finaly from Mauritania and Senegal and everywhere to come to share the land. They've shared it all the way to Port Harcourt. Look at the tiles on the ground where you are, and you will see the kind of formations in which they had, divided up the entire land all the way to Bonny and Badagry in Lagos area, Bonny in River. And so we are saying that it is that is the first practical rejection of the Nigerian Federation by that part. The campaign we are leading was then the response of, because these same people who have imposed Sharia have departed from a union of sanctity of life. Under Sharia, the adherents owe it a duty of faith to kill the infidel. How are we to be in a union where our compatriots owe it a duty of faith to kill us? We saw what happened with Gideon Akadoka. We saw what happened with Deborah in Sokoto. We saw what's going on with, we had when Dr. Melafia told us who and who was doing what. We saw what Buhari, the champion of Sharia, and the killings that come with Sharia, the same people adopted in their worldview, their civilization is that of feudalism. Feudalism. Under Sharia, we were exposed to being killed as infidels. Under their feudalism, were exposed to being killed too, because in their worldview of feudalism, there's only the master and the slave. Our insistence on democracy is infuriating to them, because in feudalism, you can't be talking democracy, because the slaves cannot have equal rights with the master. The reason that people are flying flags, Odua nation, Biafra nation,